Hello and welcome to A Place in the Sun webinar with Chase Buchanan. My name is Mark Sutherland and I've worked for A Place in the Sun for over 9 years. So if you're a UK national thinking about moving to Spain or already living in Spain, you've probably heard a lot of advice. Some of it helpful, some of it well-meaning but wrong, and some of it genuinely costly if you act on it. Today we're putting 10 of the most common myths about expat finances in Spain to the test. Joining me today is John Dike, a financial advisor at Chase Buchanan based in Marbella in Spain. John is one of Chase Buchanan's most experienced advisors, working with British expats across Spain, providing independent, qualified financial guidance at every stage of the expat journey. John, welcome to the webinar.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. No, it's good to have you here. Well, look, let's get straight into it. There are a lot of myths when thinking about buying a property in Spain, and a good number of these myths surround the financial planning side. So today we're going to cover 10 of the most spoken about myths and look to confirm the actual truths behind them. Okay, so let's start with myth number one, which is I don't need financial advice until I've actually moved to Spain.
So that's not correct. The earlier that you seek advice, the better. The more we can help you, the more options we'll have. So ideally, someone should approach Chase Buchanan about 6 to 12 months before they move to Spain. That's the best point in time we can help you because we can then help you look at all the things you need to review before you move here, how you can get residency rights and what you need to do before you move from a financial tax perspective, and make sure that you are efficient once you arrive in Spain as well. So we can design that plan for you at any stage, but the earlier we design it, the better. But you probably don't want to reach out to us like 5 years before you move because there's so many things that can change and our solutions can change as well, and Spanish tax laws can change. That's why it would be ideal to reach out to us about 6 to 12 months before you actually intend to make a move.
Thanks, John. And in terms of the time frame, you said obviously not reach out 5 years before, but what would you say would be someone looking to relocate? What would be an ideal time frame to start a conversation with yourselves?
So, as I said earlier, it'd be about 6 to 12 months before you move is ideal because it gives us time to review things properly with you, and it gives you time to take certain actions that we may recommend that you take. To give you some examples, we can look at what you should do with your UK properties, whether you have a main residence to sell, whether you have a buy-to-let property portfolio. We can look at options to sell them or don't sell them, and if you take certain actions, what's the implication in Spain? We can look at your investments, how they're structured, how they would be taxed if you move to Spain, and we can then decide together whether it's best to retain your current investments or should it be restructured for Spanish tax efficiency. To give an example, if you have ISAs which are not tax-free in Spain, then there may be an opportunity to restructure your ISAs and put you into a structure that works very well in Spain, not just for tax efficient income or growth, but also for longer term planning, like estate planning. And then we'll look at what else, like pensions, for example. What's the implication of having a UK pension in Spain? Should you take any actions before you move, like the pension lump sum, for example, if you do have access to that at this age, at your current age?
Brilliant. Well, look, we'll get more into the ISAs and pensions and selling your property on some of the other myths. So, yeah, we'll move on to the next myth. Thanks, John. You mentioned ISA in one of your answers there as well. A common myth that we hear quite often as well is that people think that their ISA is protected when they move abroad, and then it keeps its tax-free status when you move overseas. But tell us, is that correct? Is that wrong? What's
That
your
is
views
wrong,
on that one?
unfortunately. Yeah, so an ISA is a UK savings product and it offers you a tax wrapper in the UK. So any interest, dividends, or capital gains that occur inside the ISA are tax-free, but only as long as you're a UK tax resident. So if you move to Spain and you retain your ISA, then that tax-free status, the tax shelter, is lost. And it means that it will be taxed on a rising basis. So any dividends you get, any interest income, any capital gains that you realize in the investments inside the ISA are fully taxable in Spain on an ongoing rising basis. which is why it's worth reviewing your ISAs before you move to Spain, ideally.
No, thanks, John. I think it's a great point, and we do a few of these sort of seminars at our exhibitions as well. We often talk about ISAs, and it's amazing when we tell people that they lose that protection when they start to then they've moved abroad, and then they have to pay their tax on it because it's a worldwide asset as well. And the amount of sort of gasp and people sort of making notes to think, ah, I need to sort that one out straight away. So no,
Yeah.
thanks for that one. The third myth is about selling your property, and then the myth is that you can sell your property whenever, even once you've moved abroad. It really doesn't matter when. How would you answer that myth there, John?
So if you sell your main residence as a UK tax resident, then you can use something called the private residence relief. And if you sell your property within 9 months of moving out from the UK, then normally it's completely tax free. But once you move to Spain, if you sell it as a Spanish tax resident, then that property sale could be taxable potentially, depending on your circumstances. So my advice is normally if you're planning to sell, like sell your main residence before you move as a UK tax resident and before you become a Spanish tax resident, because that will give you a clean break between the two different tax systems. So if you sell it before you become tax resident here, you don't need to report to sell here, and you won't be taxed on it here.
And does that apply if you were to sell in the same tax year? So, for example, let's say you sold your property in April and become a tax resident in Spain in May, June the same year. Does that trigger a tax that you have to pay overseas, or does that, how does that work?
Potentially. So the Spanish rules for selling your main home are the following, and they distinguish between factors like your age, for example, and how long you've lived in a property for. So the rules say that if you are over age 65 and you sell your main residence, which you've been registered in for at least 3 years, then that would be tax-free sale. So people that are moving here, and most of people I speak with, they're retiring early or they're already retired. So most of them are like around age 65. In theory, they could potentially, let's say it's a married couple, they're age 66 and they've lived in a UK property for 20 years. In theory, they could sell it tax-free even as Spanish tax residents within 2 years of moving out of the property. The problem is that I've had cases where people, that the sale falls through, and I've had cases where 4 sales fell through. They were expecting to sell it within 2 years of moving here, and they didn't manage to sell the property. And this became a big problem because after 2 years, you'd be taxed on the full gains from the sale. And there is very little you can do to offset the gain. So someone that, let's say, they lived in a UK property for 30 years and the property prices have moved up a lot over 30 years, they can find themselves having a very large Spanish gains tax bill if they sell the property once they are in Spain, even if they're over 65, if they sell after 2 years. So it's very important to have a chat with someone like myself. We can help you plan for that. We can look at all the options for you as well.
I think that's a great point, John. And I'll be honest, it's one I've not considered, that people expect to sell a property at a certain time and move overseas and trying to link the two together. But then, as you rightly said, property falls through in the UK, and then it could be another 3, 4, 5, 6 months, if not more, after that. And I have heard of people in Spain. We've got a property in Spain, and speaking to neighbours where they've done it the wrong way, and it's cost them quite a bit of money. So I think to answer that myth, definitely worth having a chat with you guys first of all before you sell your property, or certainly become a resident overseas as well. So yeah, great point there, John. Um, Myth four is more to do with the living expenses. So a lot of people say that Spain is cheaper to live in the UK, and then they're going to need less money, and then their finances just sort themselves out. I mean, it's quite a common myth. What's your views on that one?
It's true that the cost of living in Spain can be lower than in the UK. However, your financial obligations do not simplify just because you move to Spain. So it's still really important to keep an eye on your finances and speak to us, and we can help you with your financial planning and make sure that your assets are tax position in Spain, and we take into account the differences between the different tax systems, the UK tax system and Spanish tax system. Something people don't know generally is that Spain is divided up into 17 different tax regions. So depending on where in Spain you move to, you got to look at not just Spanish tax, but also the regional tax. And also, if you have a UK assets, so if you retain UK buy-to-let properties, for example, or if you have a UK private pensions or occupational pensions, those assets, especially after April 2027, will form part of your UK state for inheritance tax purposes forever, even if you live in Spain. So UK assets are always liable for UK inheritance tax. And this is really important to plan for. So when we advise our clients, we don't just look at how to find a short-term solution, how to invest a lump sum right now. We'll look at how that advice, we give advice on how we can plan for the medium to long term. What happens in the event of, let's say married couple, what happens in the event of first death or second death? How can we simplify passing assets to each other and down the family in the very long term?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point about the different regions. We've spoken before with one of your colleagues, and didn't realise there was so many different laws and taxes in different regions as well. So again, it's important that you get that right before you move over to Spain to know exactly what your costs are going to be. But also once you're in Spain, if you then decided to move between region, actually having a conversation again about well, what are the differences between Costa del Sol, Costa Blanca, etc. As well. We spoke earlier about ISAs and sort of moving on to pensions, which is a big asset that a lot of people will bring over to Spain with them. One of the bits of feedback that we get is that my pension is sorted already in the UK. I set it up years ago, and I'll just wait to be paid out on it when I need it. What's your views on that myth there, John?
Yeah, so this is another area where people should seek advice, especially after Brexit, because since Brexit, there's currently UK pensions in Spain is a grey area. So it's quite complex, but to keep it short, basically you can report and tax pensions, UK pensions in Spain in different ways. That's something you need to agree with your financial advisor and Spanish tax accountant. And there may be certain actions you should take on your UK pension before you move here. To give an example, to take the tax-free lump sum if you are over age 55, I think it's been raised to 57 soon. Then if you can access your pension, take your tax-free lump sum. That's to me like a no-brainer because you wash out the tax on a big part of your pension, whilst there is no such thing as a tax-free lump sum here in Spain.
Right.
And there may also be other actions you may need to take on your pension before you move to Spain for Spanish tax efficiency, given the grey area on how UK pensions should be taxed and reported in Spain following Brexit. And also, it's important to bear in mind that UK pensions, if you have a UK pension with a UK financial advisor, they are most likely not able to advise you here in Spain. So servicing a UK pension and making sure that pension works towards your objectives in line with your risk profile can be very difficult if you retain a UK advisor that, first of all, they're not most likely not allowed to advise here if they don't have the right license in place. And also, they're most likely they won't know about Spanish regulations or regional laws, etc. So we can really help out here. Make sure you get the right service and that your pension is structured in the best way to meet your objectives in line with your preferences when it comes to risk.
Thanks, John. I think you summed it up in your first sentence there, really, that this is a big topic, and I think it's important that you don't just go to Spain and just leave things as they are and just try and get your drawdown, etc. You made a great point about making sure you take your tax-free sum before and things like annuities and drawdowns, etc. It's all important things that don't just leave it to chance and hope it's all okay and you just accept whatever you're given. Actually, if you plan well in advance, is obviously what you offer there. I think you're in a good position there just to make sure you're taking advantage of any tax, efficiencies, etc. on that side as well. Um, Another myth that comes up is, and this is one I sort of didn't know about when I bought my property in Spain, is that I don't need a Spanish will. I've got one in the UK which will cover me for Spain. I know that that's actually not true, but if you just want to cover that off as well, please, John, it's quite
Yeah,
a common one.
I speak to lots of people that have been through probate in both Spain and the UK, and once they're done the probate process, they really want to keep things simple for the family. And one way of doing so is by having a will in place in every country where you keep assets. That's always my recommendation. So if someone comes here, they retain UK assets and have property in Spain and other Spanish assets, for example, then as a minimum, they should have wills in both countries. Um, One thing to be mindful of, which is a common pitfall here in Spain for expats, is that you got to be careful with Spanish forced heirship rules, which dictate who you can pass access to. So Spanish people by default, even if you're married, about two-thirds of your assets must go to your children on the first death. And this is something that most of my clients who are UK expats, they don't want that. They want everything to go to a spouse on first death, and only on second death do they want the children to benefit. So if you want that, that can still be respected following Brexit. So there is a way, when you go to a Spanish notary, you can opt for the laws of your nationality to be applied, which means that if you have a UK passport, then you have total freedom of choice to choose any beneficiaries, both on first and second death. But when you set up your will in Spain, it's just very important that you do it correctly for that to be applied.
Yeah, and I've got, friends and people that I know that have been in a situation like that where they've had a will and it didn't, well, the partner passed away or the parents passed away and it didn't work the way they thought it was going to work and it become a bit of a legal nightmare. So it's important that you get that right from the start. I'd imagine a bit like the UK, there's probably some sort of ways to make sure you're not overpaying on capital gains or other tax sort of side of things. And we don't want to get too much into the wills, but there's probably ways that these wills can be positioned where, it's going to benefit the beneficiary really, in terms of tax purposes as well.
Good point. Give an example of how we can plan things for our clients. So nowadays it's very common that people have been married maybe two, three times. They're often they'll stepchildren in the background, and people don't realize generally that when it comes to inheritance, in many Spanish regions, you can get very good benefits for inheritance between spouses down to children and grandchildren. But when it comes to stepchildren, they don't tend to get any kind of benefits. The only exception I can think of is the Canary Islands. But other than that, there can be very harsh Spanish inheritance tax on stepchildren, and we can help you plan around that. So depending on how you set up your wills, how your assets are structured, and where they're structured, and what kind of structure, we can potentially help you save a lot of inheritance tax in Spain.
That's interesting. That's something I didn't know about the stepchildren as well. So good to know. Myth number seven, which is wealth tax only affects the wealthy. It won't apply to me. Again, I think when we start talking about wealth, people think it's just people that've got millions and stuff. But let me know your thoughts on that one, please, John.
Yeah, it's a false myth, I believe, because first of all, there are many regions in Spain where you pay wealth tax at a relatively low level. So the general wealth tax in Spain is about 700,000 euros. That's the exempt amount, and you can get a 300,000 euro exemption against your main home. There are regions in Spain where, like for example, Andalusia, Murcia, the Balearics, give a few examples, and Madrid too, they've effectively eliminated wealth tax. And you only pay tax on your wealth if you have net assets of at least 3.7 million per person in those regions. But there are regions like the Valencia region, for example, where the exemption is 1 million per person. In the Catalonia region, if you move to Barcelona, for example, then the exemption is currently only 500,000 per person. And many Spanish accountants take the view that a UK private pension should be part of your wealth tax assets. And many people have built up large pension pots in the UK during their lifetime. They come here with those pension pots, and they can find themselves that those pensions take them to the wealth tax thresholds where they have to pay wealth tax. We can help you with that kind of planning as well. So we can, if you haven't chosen a region yet, we can help you find a region that is efficient for you, linked to assets. And we can also look at what actions you could take to potentially reduce your wealth tax. We do have solutions for it. We can plan around it and try to reduce your wealth tax bill as much as possible. And again, it makes sense to reach out to us before you move, before you've done your first tax reporting in Spain. We can already make sure you're efficient from day one.
And again, John, coming back to what you said earlier about the regions, I think that again is really, really important that there's different levels of wealth tax levels in each of those regions as well. So depending on where you're going to move, and interesting what you just said there about you have to bring your pensions into it, maybe ISAs and other assets as well. Does that include your property as well, the wealth?
Yeah,
Or yeah,
wealth tax generally covers everything. There are very few
right.
exemptions to it. So generally, all assets are taken into account for wealth tax. The big exceptions I can think of could be like Spanish or EU pensions, for example, that are EU recognized, or you can yeah, there are very few assets that. Oh yeah, by the way, if you have, for example, UK properties, then they'll generally value that purchase price. So that can sometimes be an advantage for people that they retain a buy-to-let property portfolio in the UK. There are both pros and cons for retaining it, but one of the pros is that the value for wealth tax could be the purchase price only.
No, that's good to know. Yeah, again, really important to get that in place before you move over, definitely to Spain. Talking about financial advisors, there'll be some people that say they can use the same financial advisor they have in the UK, and there's no need to change it once they've moved to Spain or thinking about moving to Spain.
Yeah, so as I touched on earlier, if you have a UK financial advisor in place, they can probably help you really good when it comes to being efficient in the UK and structure assets well in the UK. But once you move here, they won't be necessarily the right person for you for many different reasons. Most likely, they will not know about Spanish rules and how to interact with UK rules. And also, most UK firms don't have the necessary license in place to give advice into Europe from the UK. So to do that, you have to have a license in place called MiFID, which we have at Chase Buchanan. So we are set up basically as a European business, and we can compliantly advise clients in Europe and in Spain, where we have a local office in Marbella, where I'm based, and we help people all over Spain. So I have clients across Spanish mainland and the islands, and we are familiar with the different tax regions. And this is something that a typical UK advisor would have no idea about the different regions here in Spain and the differences.
Yeah, I think all valid points, and when you think about it logically, there's enough laws and taxes to think about in the UK, so you can't expect someone in the UK to know it all about Spain. And as you rightly said, there's a lot of different regions and taxes and stuff to know about. So yeah, it's important that you get someone there with the Spanish knowledge, definitely. Um, Myth number nine is more to do with once you sort of settle into Spain or move abroad, and that is once everything is set up, I can just step back and all the hard work is done, and that's pretty much it. I don't need to speak to anybody on the tax financial advice side again, because it's all done.
Yeah, so financial advice is not a one-time event. So it's important to review things on a regular basis. So to benefit mostly from our services, we need to stay in touch with you, and we need to have reviews so we take into account that things change over time. It can be, for example, UK budgets, really good example. Like we've seen in the last couple of years, there's been some very big changes announced in UK budget that impact people living in Spain. So if you have a UK pension, for example, it's going to be part of your UK inheritance tax, UK taxable estate from April 2027. And we've seen, for example, changes in the UK affecting pension transfers abroad. So it's important to just bear in mind what goes on and that things change. It can be Spanish tax laws changing. It can be both at state level and regional level. And also your financial services can change personally. Like people go through different stages in life and a life event happens. Like it can be bereavement, for example. It can be receipt of inheritance. It can be lots of things that trigger a need to review things, which we normally recommend to do at least once per year, if not more often, or at a time that there is an important event.
Yeah, I think again, all great points, and picking up on one of the things you mentioned there about your circumstances do change because you're absolutely right. People will come into some inheritance, or they may be able to get their pension pot or start to draw from the pension pot, and that's one of the things that you need to take into account because it could take you above the wealth tax brackets and things like that as well. Yeah, and obviously the laws will change in Spain as well, so it's important to keep up to date. And yeah, I was looking at some of your reviews before, and it's amazing how many people said, "Look, we've been with your company for 8, 9, 10 years, whatever it would be," and every year you're able to help them with some sort of tax savings or to help them with those as well. So it's almost like relationship for forever once that you've settled down into Spain as well. And then the final myth, we've moved on to number 10, the final one. So just talking about once you're in Spain, one of the myths, and you mentioned this very early on your first point, was I've already moved to Spain without getting the advice. Is it too late to fix things?
So it's never really too late to fix things, but obviously it's best to chat with us before you move here. But even once you're here, we can still help you to make things more efficient. I think it's important to reach out to us, and we do offer complimentary reviews. We can have a chat with you and tell you what we think we can do. I'm always trying to just add as much value as I can in those conversations. So I'm trying to just find ways, areas you should look at and review, whether it comes to short-term planning, like, how to invest a lump sum to give you more capital growth or income, whether it's more like medium or long term, all your assets structured efficiently to make sure that your children who are still in the UK can they inherit in a simple way, tax efficiently, especially if there are stepchildren involved? So it's all about not being transactional. That's not what we are. We give long-term advice, which means that we have a relationship with our clients, which we have regular reviews with in the long term. And when things change over time, as we said earlier, then we can just make adjustments to the plan and make sure that your plan continues to be efficient as things change over time.
Yeah, no, it's great answer. And I think, what's clear there is you may not be able to change things once you've moved over in terms of, you sold your house and your pension and ISAs and stuff like that. But you can also save making mistakes going forward as well, which can help you in the long run. So, John, 10 myths, 10 clear answers. What strikes me is how many of these all come down to the same underlying issue, which is people assuming that what works in the UK will carry on over to Spain and that there's no urgency to act.
Yeah, exactly. I think the sooner you talk to us, the better. But I think wherever stage you are at, we can always help you in one way or another. And most people that speak with me, I think they do feedback that they're taking away things, that something that maybe they come to me for one area of advice, maybe they have a tax question and they go back with something else because maybe I said something that triggered them to review something else. So as I said, I'm always trying to add value in conversations. And by speaking with someone like Chase Buchanan, you've got absolutely nothing to lose. So please reach out to us. I'm sure we can help you one way or another.
John, thank you. That was a really valuable talk.
Mark, thanks for having me, and it's been a pleasure to be here today. And I hope that anyone that listens to this recording can take something away. What we discussed today is very generic, and it's important to seek, financial advice linked to your situation, which is why it would be good if you could reach out and have a personal chat with us, and we can then tell you how we can help you specifically linked to your particular circumstances. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Thanks again, John. Thank you.